Greetings, everyone. This is Rock and Roll Spot Connection with the Weekly Comic Book Roundup, and we're now moving on to this week's King in Black tie-ins, as well as this week's, the Spider-Man related title I picked up this week that isn't a King in Black tie-in. Kicking things off with Symbiote Spider-Man King in Black number 3. Where we left off, now remember, Symbiote Spider-Man King in Black takes place back during the Black Costume Saga. So, something like 5 or 6 years ago for the Marvel Universe, in real world terms, the mid 80s, mid to late 80s, I believe. Sounds about right. I think mid to late sounds about right. So where we left off, shadow creatures had were taking over various people. One of them appeared to the Avenger known as the Black Knight, disguised as Merlin, and ended up stealing the ebony blade from him and running Black Knight through with it. At the same time, or while all that was going on, Kang the Conqueror was trying to download a database of information from the Watcher, who got free, but there was an explosion. Kang got rescued by the most unlikely of rescuers, Rocket. At that point, just Rocket, but Rocket now currently of the Guardians of the Galaxy. So the issue begins with also the sun is being blotted out. Something is eclipsing the sun. So the issue begins with Peter swinging through Manhattan. Remember what's going on when he notices a Quinjet lifting off. So he goes and grabs hold of it and finds one of the shadow creatures inside piloting. He manages to shake him, and he lands on another ship where he's met by Kang. And he promptly attacks Kang because, it's Kang the Conqueror, well-known Avengers villain. Kang tries to explain they're all on the same side, but, Spidey isn't listening. Rocket manages to stop him. And they've got in stasis Black Knight as well as one of the shadow creatures. So Kang taunts the shadow creatures as they fly by the sun, and then the shadow creature is ejected from the ship into the sun where it destroys, and its host is revealed to be none other than Captain Marvel, Monica Rambeau. This is back when Monica Rambeau was Captain Marvel. I think Carol Danvers was binary at the time, and Marvel himself was dead. When Monica sees Kang, she of course reacts the same way Spider-Man did, but everything explains and Kang finally just explains that as Monica points out, all he wants to do is rule. He simply says, if everyone's dead, who do I rule? Which is actually a very good point. And then Black Knight, who's recovering from his wounds, explains they can't just toss the ebony blade into a star. That won't do it. It was forged by Merlin. It's magic. There's really only one person who could do it, who could unforge it. A troll named Ulysia, who lives on Nowhere. Turns out she's on... But the shadow creature that impersonated Merlin shows up with the ebony blade to have Ulysia destroy it. And apparently, it turns out she's on Nowhere to get away from her brother, who wants to kill her. Who's her brother, you might ask? Long-time Thor enemy, Ulik, the rock troll, who shows up at her shop in Nowhere just as the Ebony Blade does. And that is where the issue ends. Also, it should be noted that yes, I did plan to do a catching up on King in Black before today, but I lost track of time a little bit. So yeah, should be up if anything should be up by Saturday, or should be up by Friday. I mean, at the latest. Moving on to Venom, at number 32. Where we left off, Eddie Brock was comatose, horribly injured, in the care of some of the few remaining unnullified superheroes. When Tony Stark tried to combine Extremis with the Symbiote, something went wrong and Eddie died. The issue begins once again showing Eddie landing on a car like he did at the end of, or early on in the previous issue, and he narrates explaining he's fallen many times in his life, fallen so hard that he thought he'd never get up, and he'd seen the bottom and scratched and clawed his way up from it into the light again, but this time. Now he's finding there is no bottom. He looks up, there's only darkness. He can see his physical form is still hanging on in the world above him. He realizes he's in the hive. But it's different. It's not like when Null controlled his other and cast him out, or when Carnage did the same to him on the Island of Bones recently. He still feel a connection now, though there's nothing. But there's a voice trying to communicate with him. He says the first thing you do is stop falling. And explain the way to stop falling is you brace your ass for impact and you land. Turns out that the voice contacting him is none other than Rex Tyler. And they appear to now be in the midst of New York, covered in symbiotes, and Rex tells Eddie he's got a lot to learn. Eddie tries to save some people from some of Null's horde, but passes right through them and slams into a wall. One of Null's symbiote dragons comes up, and again, Eddie tries to attack it, but it just seems to go right through him. And Eddie realizes that yes, he's in the hive, but all the people he's running into, these are the people that have been taken over by Null's symbiote goo, including the heroes. And then Eddie gets the hard news that he's dead. And Rex actually shows the room where Eddie's body is. Dylan crying over him. Mr. Fantastic and Spider-Man standing off to the side watching. And basically Eddie's now determined to fight his way back to life. And, well, Eddie figures what he's got to do is basically first reconnect with his other, and then work from there. Or his other is basically kind of a pet of sorts for Null. But But in going after his other, he won't be alone. He'll have backup from Rex, as well as the Venom that Rex had been looking for in the first place. Flash Thompson. Though, admittedly, when Flash shows up, he looks more like Agent Anti-Venom, but, well, yeah. That is where the issue ends, and yeah, it is Flash. He's actually, says it's good to see Eddie again. I have to wonder if this means Flash Thompson will be coming back from the dead or not. Moving on to Spider-Woman number 8. Where we left off, the Martian serum was really having a negative effect on Jessica, and it basically got to the point where her friends were basically had to fight her and ended up imprisoning her in a tank meant to hold the Hulk. They left having to deal with more of the symbiote stuff when Octavia Vermis, who has become quite the thorn in Jess's side, showed up. So, Jess smashes through the tank, is thrown a syringe of something by Octavia and promptly injects it, and she's not sure she's not entirely clear-headed, and she knows Octavia. Pretty sure she hates Octavia, but turns out Octavia is right now the only person in the world that wants Jess alive. But they team up. Turns out that Octavia's got a few things that she needs to get. First off, the two of them are going to steal some of the spiders. Let's see. Let me see if it lists the name. No, it does not, sadly. Basically, they steal more of the spiders from Hydra. And then steal one of the Hydra troops' station wagons to move on to their next objective. The American Museum of Natural History, where Spider-Man foe Stegron usually hides out. Now, Stegron's got some Kurt Connors samples. And he's talking with someone who could arrange a buyer when Octavia and Spider-Woman burst in, attack Stegron, and they take one of the Connors samples. And leave Stegron knocked out. And just as she does feel kind of bad about it. The next stop is a Stark safe house in New York. So Jess goes in, gives her, logs in, and then turns out Rhodey's there. So it was supposed to be a apparently Iron Man and Captain America wanted War Machine there in case they needed a fallback point, but he doesn't know where. But yeah, she needs to go in and basically steal all of the research data that Tony Stark has on her and her condition. Her and War Machine duked out, as well as a hospitality security drone. Spider-Woman does knock out War Machine and tells mad that no one's trusted her, and basically, tells Rhodey that to tell Carol Danvers not to come looking for her. Turns out this is the last errand, though, so now they go to a hidden volcano lair, which, to be fair, Jessica called. Upon there, we meet Octavia's daughter. And Jess, having initially asked if the volcano lair was Octavia's, or no, it's not. Oh, it must be the daughter's. Like, no, not hers. No, it belongs to the High Evolutionary, who is surrounded by clones of Jess's mom. And that is where the issue ends. Which brings us to our next book, Guardians of the Galaxy, number 10. Where we left off, some peace negotiations in the aftermath of the recent Kree-Skrull Alliance war with the Kotati got derailed, and were only saved when the threat of Null was brought up to the involved parties. Also, Peter Quill, Star-Lord, long thought to be by the Guardians to be dead, was actually not dead, and was rather in some alternate universe type thing where he learned more about his element gun and became, well, a Star-Lord. So the issue begins where issue number 8 left off. The various representatives are discussing Null, what they know of Null. Hercules is asked if he knows anything about Null, but he explains that Null is not from any pantheon he recognizes. Super Skrull chimes in that this is speculation. It's only unsettling everyone. So let's talk about facts. And he mentions that the Kree-Skrull Alliance has lost planets of their own, and like the planet Sylnius, they simply ceased transmission. He then also briefly recounts the events from Web of Venom, Empire's End. And Queen Victoria of Spartax states that it's clear that the next target will be Spartax. And Nova points out there are 9 billion, it's billion with a B, people living on Spartax. So, yeah, they're going to do something. 4 hours later, the Guardians are on Spartax trying to get people into evacuation arcs. Moondragon is informed that they're at 2 billion, but then she says, well, 2 billion, that's not enough people evacuated. But apparently it's clarified. It's 2 billion dead. But basic spheres of symbiote goo keep falling from the dragon and flying around. Wherever they land, they obliterate everything. Rocket goes to show. Rocket and Nova meet up so that Rocket can explain and show it to Nova so he can see what's going on. And Rocket catches a scent. Peter Quill. And there he is. And then the dragon shows up. And Star-Lord remembers the time that he spent in the other dimension and blasts the symbiote dragon with his element gun. And so the rest of the Guardians come together. And they go off in search of another dragon, and it almost seems as though the extension of Null controlling the dragon has them, but Star-Lord overpowers them because he's a master of the sun. And well, you know what they say, sun's out, guns out. But and after the dragon explodes, Moon Dragon explains that the symbiote residue is inert. Spartax is saved, so they can take the fight to the real Null. And explain that he's on Earth. Rocket suggests they go help out. However, Star-Lord says that they can't. If Earth's in danger, they can't go near it because that will only make everything worse. And he's got half their power, and they will want it back. So he needs to go where there's no life, no one they can hurt. And he reminds Nova, when Nova asks who they are, he reminds Nova just who went through the black hole with him. The gods of Olympus. They're coming back, and they're coming for Peter. And that is where the issue ends. Which brings us to our final King in Black tie-in for the week, Return of the Valkyries. So if you'll recall, in issue 1 of King in Black, the Sentry was killed by Null. So the issue begins kind of recreating the Valkyrie charge that was shown in Thor Ragnarok. Focusing on before we go to Jane Foster, Valkyrie, talking with the spirit of Robert Reynolds, and the Sentry explains that it's just like in the movies. When you die, your life flashes before your eyes. And but when it did, it was just the good parts. But basically, it's the before moment when they're about to, as she's she ferries the dead to Valhalla. Well, she sometimes they get a little chatty and want to wait a little bit, and so she's indulging that. Elsewhere, that lone Valkyrie, the Valkyrie who is reminiscing, is in a bar, not on Earth. Orders a drink as well as a baseball bat and smacks the customer. Carved into the bar is "You're not dead, Trad. Fight this." Or trap. Yeah, you're not dead, trap, and fight this. On the way to Valhalla, however, Jane and the Sentry come upon the corrupted husk of a celestial. Valkyrie's trying to the other Valkyrie's trying to put everything together. She has a flashback to first time she kissed her lover. Meanwhile, Jane is trying to face the creatures coming from the dead Celestial, who appear to be nullified versions of lost souls. And then when the Sentry tries to help, he gets swallowed up by the tide of blackness, and Valkyrie reaches in with her mace. Well, having made a chain mace with the all weapon that she wears on her wrist, and the other Valkyrie grabs it. her and Jane briefly switch places, and then Jane manages to get loose. And the other Valkyrie realizes that what she's going through is real. And Jane asks who this other Valkyrie is, and to herself she simply says that I could tell her I was one of the original 9, that I rode for Bor and as for his boy Odin, that I raised a glass at the first feast in Valhalla, but instead all I manage is, I'm no one. And that is where the issue ends. Bring us to our final book of the week, Miles Morales Spider-Man number 22. Where we left off, Miles and his allies, Miles, his uncle, as well as some other allies, had managed to defeat Ultimatum, and in fact sent Ultimatum and Ultimate Green Goblin back to the Ultimate Universe. However, it seemed the victory was seemingly at the cost of Miles' Uncle Aaron. So, Miles' father is doing some fixing up their place after the event, the previous story arc, and he puts a little sign on the wall saying "Welcome to the Morales home." And yeah, it's corny, but and while Miles Best is corny, he does also ask, shouldn't it say Davis Morales? And Miles' dad explains that he's changed his name to Jefferson Morales. And he suggests that they should talk about but then Miles' dad suggests that maybe they should consider a service for Uncle Aaron. But Miles says they don't know if he's even dead. And so, but Jeff says, I can wait. But he also says, hey, why don't you go out for a bit, You and your guys go to the movies. Here's some money. But Miles' friends have a meeting with a congresswoman about all the Cradle stuff. But Jeff says that Miles needs to get out of the house. Let off some steam. If your boys are busy, call one of your other friends. So, turns out he called Starlin. Apparently, called at the right time too, because she needed to get out of the house because she was tired of sitting around her thoughts, because she found some bad stuff about her grandfather, the Vulture, real bad stuff. This was apparently in Amazing Spider-Man 850. She says this mess up having a supervillain in her family, and Miles says, I feel you on that. Trust me, I feel you. She asks what he means, but then Spidey's spider sense goes off, and there's a giant ice pharaoh walking around downtown now. Gank, Judge, and Barbara meet with the congressman. Their meeting's ending. They're not going to be charged with anything. It's a good, they're lucky Captain already got involved, but he shouldn't have had to. The congressman also states that Cradle is overzealous and they've been given dangerously broad authority. So, Gank and Barbara decide to go get some empanadas. Judge is being victim by his grandmother, so he can't join them. So, turns out the giant ice pharaoh thing is being controlled by the Frost Pharaoh, an old enemy of Miles's. Old enemy. So, they duke it out. It doesn't really... being a giant moving ice thing doesn't really, it's a bit harder for Miles to deal with that. But he has an idea and runs it by Starling, basically. While Gank and Barbara have their empanadas, and Barbara figures this is probably kind of, awkward because, she was dating Miles, and Gank's Miles' best friend. They both kind of say, they both say they should go, but then they reaching for empanadas, each reaching for an empanada, and then grabbing each other's hands. So apparently the plan that Miles came up with was to have Starling fly him directly over the Ice Pharaoh, who is now going, the Frost Pharaoh, who is now going by the name the Ice God. But he charges up a Venom blast, blasts the thing, destroying a good chunk of it. Busts Ice God, Frost Pharaoh, leave him webbed up to a lamppost, and they head on out. On a nearby rooftop, Miles and Starling talk. He asks, if she feels any better. She's like, no, yeah. She feels like crap, but a different flavor of crap. And they talk a bit about names and the importance of them. And she explains why she chose the name Starling. Starling's got a bad rap, too loud, too aggressive. They didn't ask to be brought here. They're just trying to live. And her real name, Tiana, means princess. And Miles reveals his identity to her. Introduces himself as Miles Morales. Which surprises Starling, who says that she knew he was cute. And then she kisses Miles, which, I'll be honest, when we first met Starling, I'm pretty sure I stated right off that, yeah, two of them were going to end up together. And she flies off, and Miles goes back to the school, runs into the gang, but there's something Gank wants to talk to him about. But there's also an alien invasion, so the school's been evacuated. And before Gank can get to the important thing on his mind, Miles looks outside, and, well, there's one of those big symbiote dragons. That is where the issue ends. That's to be it for this week's roundup. As always, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Links to my Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, and PayPal can be found in the description box down below. This is Rock and Roll Spock signing off, saying live long and rock hard.